America is here. His deputy, the Honorable Charles Edubuahin here, who is a consultant on the project currently. He's here with us. And then the Ghana Health Service team that will do another brief when we are done with this first one is also here, Dr. Pikaboji and his team. So, Minister, I'll yield to you for your introductory comments as we start.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the ministry this afternoon. As Honorable Kojo mentioned, we're going to have the presentation in two parts. I will really just give sort of an overview of the whole issue of gold in our country. Then Charles will go through some detailed presentation which will answer most concerns and issues, and then we'll throw it out for Q&A to enable us to dig deeper into that. But I think for starters, I just want to put the country in readiness to reimagine what we've been doing for 60 years and where we want to go as a country. So for centuries, our people get far less than what we deserve. We are placed at the bottom of the list of the beneficiaries for our own riches, whether it is gold, cocoa, timber, oil, bauxite, or diamonds. The story has been the same everywhere. This is predominantly to do with the fact that our value extraction ends the point at which these resources leave our shores. Unfortunately, analysis undertaken over an extended period has shown that the largest increase in value occurs at exactly this point when it leaves our shores, where raw resources leave the country and is converted into either refined products or monetizable securities. 500 times more gold is traded every day than is mined. Much of this happening in countries that have very little gold to themselves. President Akufo-Addo is clear in his mind that to achieve a Ghana beyond aid, we must add considerable value to what we produce and trade. We often fail to see this value because when assessing the effectiveness of our policies and legislation, we limit the extent of our expectation to our national borders. We take no interest in what happens to our resources when they leave our shores, whether it be how they are traded in foreign markets, how companies leverage them to create cheap financing, or the different ways in which they are utilized to generate profit. The value chain includes the international stock market, where incidentally virtually all the foreign investors who are involved in the extractive industry in Ghana are also operating. In assessing value we receive, we often focus on the metrics such as the percentage of government taking and tax as the only means of assessing the value that is retained by the resource owner ourselves. This type of analysis ignores many of the differing ways in which the companies that extract the resource utilize their rights beyond and outside of our borders as a means of creating value, specifically leveraging that value to those who do not want to invest directly in our country but do want access to resources and have access to capital that could help us to both accelerate our development and diversify our economy. This desire to domesticate our expectations when operating in a global market only acts to hurt and limit developing economies. The NPP government is determined to break our economy free from these old boundaries. If the foreign investor can use recoverable reserves in our country He has in a concession granted us to him to raise money, which he company that there are those who say we should be careful not to mortgage or sell today the gold in the ground for future generations. First of all, this is not the case, but I have two questions for those who raise these concerns. If it is okay for the foreign investor who holds a concession to sell what is in the ground upfront, then why not us? More importantly, why is it okay to borrow today for the future and not good to use our resources to leverage assets for tomorrow? We must be creative to extend our sources of raising income to support our development. We are in a hurry to catch up. Every year, every generation we wait, we keep millions of people and families stuck in the abyss of poverty and sufferings. If we want to increase our share of the global pie, it sometimes means creating new innovative structures that give direct access to the natural resource in a manner that is open and transparent and operate in accordance with laws that exist outside of our own country. That is why listed oil companies that operate in Africa can raise capital at levels closer to the European companies where they are based and not countries where they operate. They create structures that force the investors' exposures on the commodity, not the country. This opens up new areas of funding. The tactic of compartmentalizing and separating perceived risks of actual risk has helped flawed companies to create more value from our resources than the governments and people who own the resources themselves. We only need to look at tallow, recently damaged by corporate problems and yet still able to raise low-price bonds in the midst of the economic crisis and able to do so at a rate lower than the government of Ghana, from whom it receives its mandate to extract resources. This is the case even at a time where our government is raising funding at historically low levels when compared to our predecessors. So it is time to reimagine our future. We all, by now, must be tired by being cheated by foreign companies, and we're straining ourselves from using the same vehicles that they use. We have to maximize value of our income that is due the Republic from the mineral wealth that we have for the benefit of our citizens, and that is the prime objective of the MIIF, to maximize the value of the income due the Republic from the mineral wealth of the country for the benefit of our people. So we are really excited about the listing of Agyapa in London at the end of the year. It creates the first royalty company of that nature in Africa. It is really sad that for a country that has been mining gold since the 15th century with the Portuguese, we still don't have any international listed company, either in gold or even in cocoa. This must come to an end, and we believe it's a strong statement to register Ghana's presence going forward. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, I'm going to ask you to make some
We'll start here. So what is the Agyapa Royalties? Essentially, Agyapa Royalties is a gold royalty company. Gold royalty companies have existed for market capitalization of 23.4 billion. I believe is listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. Sandstorm market cap of 1.7 billion. Osiko market cap of 1.9 billion. Royal Gold Inc. The price of the share price divided by your earnings per share.
You know, for a country that was known previously known as the Gold Coast, we really have not capitalized on that brand that we have naturally and have. I didn't even know that we've been mining gold since the 15th century, but that goes to show that, you know, really this is something that's part and parcel of the whole Ghanaian entity. Moving on, there's a lot of questions being asked about the name change. And when we initially incorporated, we agreed that we wanted to incorporate offshore because we wanted to list on one of the larger stock exchange, preferably the London Stock Exchange, because then we attract the most investment, the most people will look at the shares and be interested in buying the company as compared to sitting on the Ghanaian Stock Exchange, which will limit your investor pool. And also the depth of the London Stock Exchange is much deeper than the Ghanaian Stock Exchange. So we agreed I will do a dual listing. And then the next question was, we need to domicile the entity in a jurisdiction that will provide the ability for the royalties not to be taxed. We decided to incorporate in Jersey. We did a name check in Jersey and realized there were no names by that, no companies by that name, so we were pretty good to go. And the reason we liked Asase was that, you know, gold comes from the earth. It, you know, depicted, you know, where the gold was coming from. However, and this was back in 2018 when we were structuring the whole transaction. Somewhere along the line, our transaction advisors recommended that we would need to have, Asase would have to have a subsidiary in Ghana where the royalties will first flow to before they are transferred abroad. So we need to incorporate Asase Ghana Limited. You know, they may be confused. So we thought that, look, just to remove any doubt or uncertainty, we should look to change the name. And because of that, we went around and we came up with Agyapa, which is essentially Agyapa, which felt that we shorten so that, you know, white friends can easily pronounce it. But also that it retains its Ghanaian personality. And entity. And so that is how this whole came about. I mean, it's not complicated, pretty straightforward situation. Infrastructure. You know, what like further up the value chain and not just find the raw ore and export it in its raw form. We need to be able to build refineries to refine the ore and do more value add. On the health side, it's all about resilience. This pandemic has showed us how important it is to make sure that we have health facilities across the length and breadth of the country, and especially in these mine areas where these miners always are running at the risk of their lives in these conditions. On the housing side, I think also the pandemic has showed us the importance of housing across the whole country, and we believe that it will be a good use of the monies to self-support some of our initiatives in the housing sector. Then also the road infrastructure. There's a lot of roads in these mining areas. In fact, a few of the mining companies have, as part of their social corporate responsibility, down the roads or improve the roads, but also for their own use because they use them. And a lot of heavy trucks ply these roads because of these mines. And it's important that these roads are kept in good condition in order to attract investment into these areas. So why issue equity in a company instead of raising debt? I would like to use the example of the road fund transaction that was done by our predecessors. Essentially, the royalty company or a royalty deal is a form of securitization. Essentially what we are doing, and that is what our predecessors tried to do with the road fund levies. However, they decided to do a transaction. They borrowed about, I believe it was 1 billion cedis for 3 years and encumbered almost all our road fund levies to pay that back. Their interest rate was over 30%. And so what happened was that when we came in, we didn't have a dime left in the coffers and the road fund to be able to maintain and do our roads because all the money had been encumbered towards this road fund. So this is a totally different structure where it is not a loan, it's equity. We are selling shares. You buy shares in a company. We don't have to pay the money back. I've got at risk because they believe in the capacity and the capability of the company. It's very important that we understand that the royalty company is a good concern, is a company that will have a management team, is a company that will be actively working, going out and identifying prospects that they can invest in and royalty streams that they can buy. It is my understanding that in Ghana there are going to be a 'going concern that is do work and of which government will still be a 50% shareholder. So it's really not and investors believing in the huge prospects with gold has to offer will be prepared to participate in it. So that's essentially the reason why we are doing this, and we are actually it as an equity transaction rather than a debt transaction. Also, I should have said in the previous slide that the kind there's a flight to gold, as people have seen interest rates come down. you have um, the 103 million, 132, 133, 100, 140. That come to government. So this is in total, including the other money. Royalties that have jumped quite a bit between 2018 and 2019. So I'm sure in 2020 we'll see a little higher in terms of the revenue received. Next page, please. Most gold companies are up 50% or 100% year on year. I'll have to check from my equity guys, but because of the price of gold, we've seen a lot of appreciation in gold shares. And if the same thing was to happen in the Agyapa, we'll see that capital appreciation, and because Ghana government will still be a 50 plus 1% shareholder, will benefit that. Which then pass them on to Agyapa Royalty in Jersey. But first, before they do that, they take out 20% and give in dividends to their shareholders, which includes minerals income fund, of course, of new prospects. But we anticipate that in the beginning, due to the flurry of activity, new investments, because they already have a pipeline of deals that they've identified, we'll see a lower payouts ratio, and going forward that might increase over time. Next please. The Minerals Development Fund, so it's 20% of the royalty flows. Agyapa will then take 75 points. GRA, as I said, keeps its fee of 2.4, and Minerals Income Investment Fund itself retains a fee of 2% to cover its operations. So this is what will happen now. Previously, 80% would have gone to the consolidated fund and disappeared into the budget year on year. So, as I said, the statement that traditional authorities lose right to royalties is untrue. We should have put that up so that you could see, but I hope it's clear. Next page, please. What does the Mineral Development Fund do with the 20% it receives? 50% of it goes to the Office of the Administrator of Stool Lands, 20% to the Mining Committee Development Scheme, 4% supplement the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, 30% supplements the Minerals Commission, 8% out of this 20% supplements the Geological Survey Department, and 5% goes to research, training, and projects aimed at promotion of sustainable development through mining. Why the listing in Ghana and London? Listing will provide transparency and introduce a high level of corporate governance, which is a mandatory requirement for companies that are listed on the London Stock Exchange and most exchanges for that matter. The London is one of the major stock markets for mining companies. Is in order to realize maximum value for the share being sold, London is the ideal way to ensure there's a listing in London. Canada is also another destination, but that's quite far. I think we're all used to London, and it's just as effective as Canada is. And also, the London Stock Exchange is deep. I think the market cap of the London Stock Exchange is over here. I think is about $3.2 trillion dollars. And the aim, which is also in London, is another 115 billion. The number of companies that are listed on the UK Stock Exchange but that are incorporated and domiciled in Jersey, which is in the Channel Islands, is over 1,200 companies from over 60 countries. So, I mean, Jersey is a known destination for incorporating companies that want to be listed on London. In fact, we work very closely with the Jersey and the office of in the Prime Minister's office in London with regard to getting the clearance to make sure that we could use Jersey as the place for incorporation. And the UK government is really very supportive of Jersey Incorporated entity, because they benefit, because most of these companies end up being listed on the London Stock Exchange. And so as an income and profit after tax. So that profit will be taxed before then you get your net income will then come out. And that will be at 25% tax. Same thing here, incorporated in the UK itself. We would have moved, let's say, $100 in royalties from here to the UK entity Agyapa. It would have gone in there as revenue. It would have then paid the holders. So by routing this to Jersey, the 100 comes in the same 100 less whatever operating expenses there are no taxes, which means that the shareholders are getting the full benefit of 100 that they're of royalties, which also means that the valuation that they'll put on the company will be 25% higher than if this was domiciled in a tax jurisdiction. Meaning that with the valuation that Ghana will get for this entity will be 25% higher essentially. Next slide, please. We just thought we should show Ghana companies on the Ghana Stock Exchange that are in gold. I was surprised to notice that I think there were only two. There was another one called New Gold, something I didn't seem to have any information. And so really, and the Anglo Gold, I think the main listing is on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And this is out of a merger between Ashanti Gold Fields, Ashanti Gold Company, and Anglo Gold. So these are the two companies that are actively trading on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Market cap of the stock exchange is 52.7 billion Ghana cedis, which includes quite a bit from secondary listings, including Tallow and Anglo Gold. That is just about $10 billion. That's the size of the Ghana Stock Exchange. Next page, please. What is the legislation? So when we started, or we decided to put together this transaction, we realized that we need to put in place supporting legislation. This was back at the beginning of 2018. So what we did was that we went through a procurement process to procure the services of a transaction advisor. We had about 10 or 11 bids, proposals submitted. We went through a rigorous evaluation process and listed it to one entity with a local partner. They then were tasked with looking at the whole, advising us on the best structure to use for the transaction. And through that sort of due diligence and analysis process came out the fact that we would need to pass an act to establish an entity that will be put in place to manage the royalty and the equity interest that Ghana has in its mining companies. And so we then started put together the act. We engaged the services of lawyers to help us draft the act, submitted it to Parliament, and somewhere in 2018, it was then referred to the Finance Committee. Finance Committee went site to Aqua Safari for a weekend, went through the whole act clause by clause, and this of course involved MPs both on both sides of the aisle. And by the time we're done, we had come up with what we believed was a solid act to cover this transaction. It was then passed by Parliament and assented to, I think, in the third or fourth quarter of 2018. Once that's done, we then went on the road and had some preliminary discussions with potential investors and asset managers to see what their concerns will be. And a lot of them were concerned about government's ability to intervene and also to interfere in the operations of what was supposed to be an independent company that will be listed. So we then had to come up with various agreements, including a relationship agreement, an investment agreement, an assignment agreement, which will support the creation of this entity. So that is what we've been doing over the last 2 years. In fact, we wanted to try and get this transaction done last year. We've mentioned it in the 2018 budget that we'll be monetizing royalty streams. We also mentioned it in the 2019 budget. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to market on time, and when this year started, COVID hit, so that has also added some additional delays. So this has been a while in the making. It's something that has been very well structured, very well thought through, and we've come quite a long way. It is unfortunate that the perception is out there that there's something that was hastily put together. We have benefited from the delays though. As you can see, gold prices are now at about 1900, and these companies are their valuations directly correlated to where gold prices are. So, you know, there's a silver lining in everything. We now are in a position where we can take advantage of price being at an all-time high. Next page. So these are the entities that were involved in as we went through all this. We to go to the Attorney General. They went through every line in all the agreements. Minerals Commission actually has somebody who sits on the Minerals Investment Fund board. The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources has been very involved. They had to ratify all the mining leases for the companies that were whose royalties were going to assign. Bank of Ghana, of course, because they had to give us permission to get the dollars or have a company that, you know, was receiving dollars. And of course JRA, because they're the ones who collect the royalties. And so we've had a lot of engagements. We've also met with the mining companies to explain to them how the act will work and how their payment is going to change in terms of who they're paying to. And of course the Minerals Development. Next page, please. I think we've spoken about the benefits already. We'll receive dividends, capital appreciation, and the ability that Agyapa will be to be able to now rapidly invest in new mines and bring them on a lot faster. And we aim to really create a Pan-African Fortune 500 company with Ghanaian roots. Next steps. Prospectus approved by the regulators in Accra. The virtual global roadshow will commence after that. company will be listed in London and Ghana. The company is currently 100% owned by government. It's only after listing that we would have other shareholders come in. Based on the valuation we get during the IPO, which will be by a book building process, we may end up only having to sell 30% of the company to generate the 500 million we are hoping to raise, or we may have to sell 35%. Depends on the valuation, but whatever the case may be, government insists on retaining majority shareholding of 51% in the company. Thank you. There was supposed to be a graph of gold prices. What happened to it? Anyway. But anyway, so that's it. I think in summary, that's the presentation. Thank you very much.
Honorable Abin, thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, just a couple of things I'd like to trade before we take the questions. Can we get the other microphone for the questions? While we do that, just a few things. So I'm sure you've noticed in recent days suggestions that this whole transaction is opaque and it is rushed. That suggestion, with the greatest of respect, is incorrect. As the Honorable Minister and his deputy have just demonstrated, as far back as 2018, even the way we want to structure this was sent to Parliament, debated clause by clause, and passed as an act of Parliament. And then when the specific transaction started, all the agreements, I think about of 5 different agreements supporting it, the assignment agreement and all of those ones laid in Parliament. I have my copies as a member of Parliament. Every member of Parliament on the Finance Committee and every member of Parliament who was in the chamber has piece of the reports of the committee that met on all these agreements. So there's been full transparency. Again, it's not been under certificate of urgency or anything as far back as 2018 when the process started till now. So that suggestion, I think we have to be very categorical, is incorrect with the greatest of respect. Secondly, there's a suggestion that there are some hidden owners of the company behind the scenes. I'm sure you've heard the expression beneficial owners. That who are the beneficial owners? Disclose them. As has been explained, the government of Ghana, by this Act of Parliament, Act 978, set up the Mineral Income Investment Fund, 100% by GOG. MIIF is 100% the owner of this company. It's when they get to the stage of doing a prospectus, listing on the market, and selling some shares that some prospective investors, nobody knows who they could be, just like our company listed, may come in. And that's a full transparent process out there. It's important that these points, and as you carry the news, you make point for everybody to understand quite clearly. We'll take your questions now, and the Honorable Minister and his deputy and some of my colleagues here will help to provide responses. When we're done with this part of the brief, and then the Minister and his colleagues leave us, the Ghana Health Service will update us on where we are on COVID. Gakpo, are you wearing your mask? Okay. So, 1, 2, 3. Let's take first 3. Yes, Joseph, let's go.
So, first of all, if Agyapa will be this profitable and in the end it will benefit the state this much, why the need to want to sell the 9% of the stake in it? Why don't you wait for the investments to mature and then eventually the nation will benefit from whatever those resources? That's my first question. The second one, as finance minister who is encouraging people to pay their taxes, and I'm sure under such a scenario you would additionally encourage people, or for that matter discourage people from saving their resources in taxing, don't you think incorporating this company in a taxing would end up rather encouraging other individuals to want to do same as a way to probably dodge taxes and protect their money? And then thirdly, Africa Legal Associates, which we know is actually owned by someone who is your family member, Mr. Finance Minister. Just as you mentioned, Kofi Asafo, Honorable Oponkoma, he said that Kofi Asafo is a consultant to the project. We know has the senior minister as the father. Mr. Finance Minister, don't you think that such a situation of people who are directly related to yourself and the senior minister involved in the deal will have creating conflicts of interest situations? Thank you.
So, just to be clear, you're saying that if it is this profitable, why don't we wait for the investments to mature? Right, Joseph? Okay, so you may want to deal with that, assuming there are some investments we are even talking about which should mature. And then what do you make of questions that there could be potential conflict of interest and its impact on encouraging people to save resources in savings? Yes, sir.
Yes. I want to know how the percentage of royalties that is targeted at fighting climate change or environmental degradation, as because we are talking of mining here, so that I would like to know how much, what has gone into that percentage, that component of environmental and saving our environment, our water bodies and all that.
Are you asking, sorry sir, are you asking whether,
To know the percentage?
just trying to get some clarity, take your time. Are you asking whether, in terms of the usage of royalties today, in the old structure, there's a percentage that is allocated for fighting climate change? Is that the question you're asking?
Not exactly. I want to know whether with Agyapa we actually have made a deliberate effort to look at the environment, because we are going to the extractive industry. And definitely it's repercussion on the environment.
Okay, so in the new structure,
the new structure.
Is there anything to deal with? Very well.
And what has gone into that? Now, my other one, we are looking at Agyapa. Try to take about 75%, if I got it right. Slides that is going to benefit about 5% or so. There's a figure of 75% or so, and if that is the case,
royalties.
For the royalties,
Yes.
I'm thinking that that thing could skew.
So it has nothing to do with the operators of the mine. They would still pay their royalties anyway. Okay, so, and then there was a third one here.
You went through before implementing this. But some of the corporate social organizations, especially in the extractive sector, they mentioned that they were not quite consulted in the process. We see that when in the licensing round, for example, they are a very vital part of the process. So I was wondering if this is something that you're going to consider. Oil and gas licensing round, yeah. So I'm wondering if this is something that you considered, and for future activities, would this be something that you'd be willing to put on the table if you considered it the last time? Thank you.
So, Minister, let me just answer that question. Beyond the advertisement of the book publicly, the engagement of Parliament and by extent the entire country, is there any further consultation that you missed? Especially coming from the background that some CSOs are saying that they should have been consulted, correct? And were not consulted. If you want to add that to that one. So, you may want to provide us with answers.
Let me try and maybe reduce the choleric level. You know, sometimes I feel people sound really agitated with the questioning. I think really you look at how this government has managed the economy and the skill set that the president has put at the Ministry of Finance. So you can see how we were able, when we came and there was no resources, we're able to get about 2.2, and that's both instinct and knowledge. I think some of the people were saying, I mean, I think I've been in the capital market business since 1984, when I finished college, beginning to date myself. And Charles has also been in the capital market business. So truly, you know, it's a point in time in which our leadership both has the knowledge, understanding of the markets that are there, the type of resources that are leveraged to be able to do that. And really, that's what we are bringing to bear. And I suppose you can judge us by what we have done during that period. So I'm trying to understand your question about the investment maturing. What do you mean by that? I mean, essentially what we have done is to say we are getting some royalties every year, maybe $150 million. You know, there are some major things we have to do as a country which demands big capital. What do you do to be able to securitize that, leverage that? But even in so doing, you are also going to be receiving those royalties on a regular basis. And therefore, the dividends would also come to us. So suddenly, you've opened a way in which you can do that. But the other interesting aspect is that given there needs to be, you know, maybe a reduction in the cynicism to understand that what we are doing is really to promote where Ghana needs to go and where it used to be. I think the issue of taxes, you know, it's in a sense, it's almost like being more Catholic than the Pope. You know, the world consists of all sorts of structures to be able to generate resources. Okay. Now, if I therefore need to go to the London Stock Exchange, I want my company being taxed twice. And it's not, you know, an issue of I'm doing something wrong. And therefore, you use that platform to be able to do that so that we get our money back to us. Are there ways in which people legitimately use tax laws to be able to reduce taxes? Yes, they do. Now you have to make sure that it's within above the spirit and that you are not getting wrong. So I think that's what we should do. So yes, we are very confident that this is the way to go. We have done enough of these type of transactions. We have seen how foreign companies benefit from our resources, and we just sit staring at them. And I think it is time to reimagine the future, you know, to put our stamp on understanding that these things are ours and we are going to get the best out of them. And there are two markets, there's the physical market and the virtual market, or the stock market. And we never seem to go there to do that. So I don't see anything really wrong with what we are doing. I don't know, Charles, do you want to follow through on some questions I've missed here?
Is there any part of the new structure that is climate change?
Yeah. Regards to climate change, sorry, I believe that is addressed with the 20% that goes to the Minerals Development Fund. They have a bucket there that deals with environmental degradation, climate change, and all environmental issues. Yeah. And then there was also a question about conflicts. With regards to LA, my response to that, and I've been asked already, is that firstly, ALA happens to be the local partner for the English law firm that we're using on this transaction, White & Case. So they work hand in hand with them. So they came in with White and Case as their local partners. We're also using Bella, which is also another law firm. And the gentleman in question that was referred to happens to be a partner in ALA. But there are several other partners, and it's a partnership. These law firms are set up as partnerships. And the partner we're working with on this is another partner altogether, not the gentleman in question. So really, we didn't see any conflicts there at all. And to be honest, when you're working on such a transaction and you want to be listed on the London Stock Exchange, they're very particular and extremely diligent in their due diligence, even to the extent of looking at all your advisors, transaction advisors, to ensure that they're comfortable with them and are very and clear that there are no conflicts whatsoever there as well. Oh, and also to deal with my good friend Kofi Osafo for selection process. We engaged as part of, when we started this in 2018, as part of the whole process, we also engaged a headhunting firm, and the firm is called Conferry, Kornferry. They're based out of California. They're a global headhunting firm, and we asked them to help us identify and shortlist a candidate for the CEO position, for the CFO position for Agyapa, and also for the board. And they scoured the whole globe. We said our preference for the Ghanaian, for the CEO position, that it should be a Ghanaian, and ideally also for the chairman of the board. We also wanted very strong operators who were experienced and had a background in mining. I think there were over 30 or so candidates that were eventually shortlisted that were brought to us. Of that, 6 were Ghanaian, and he happened to be one of the 6. He also happened to be working by then with SNET. So we then said, okay, he was a good prospect, but until such time as we got to the listing stage, we would engage him as a consultant, especially then be able to exactly see if he would bring the right value to the table and was able enough to do the job. His background was a right fit. He had to have been in the asset management business, being a equity research analyst covering gold and mining and energy stocks. So in London, and worked for some of the biggest asset management firms, investment management firms that we know of. And that position, not only did he have the technical knowledge of mining, but he also had the financial knowledge. And most importantly, because he interacted with investors on a daily basis, he had a good appreciation for what investors would be looking for in purchasing an asset such as this. And going forward, in managing the company, he would have a nose for the right type of investments to make and the conditions around which to make them, which it is a very key part of this whole story, because once you're going to market, the investors are going to look at your management team and need to be convinced that this is the team that knows what they are doing, will be able to identify the right assets and the mining companies to back forward, because that's where the value is going to accrue and the capital is going to appreciate. So that was the reason. It was just that. It just happened to be a coincidence that he happens to be somebody we know and happens to be a relative of somebody who is already in the government. I happen to also know him because we went to the same school. He was a year ahead of me in school. So, I mean, I don't think that was also a coincidence. It could have been anybody else. So, it was just about finding the right person for the job. But there were other people, Ghanaians, but most of them were actually just miners. They had worked in a mine, in mining engineers, had a lot of mining experience, but had very little finance experience, very little equity experience, very little private equity and investment experience. So that didn't work well.
Okay, so we're going to get a second back of questions. On the what? Yes. Did we miss anything in the consultation process? And looking forward, is there some further consultation that needs to take place?
I mean, I think, as Minister mentioned, we did go through all of that. And I guess I want to us to all realize this is not hasty, this is not rushed, because been working at this since 2018, in which has been very public with regards to parliamentary conduct. I'm sure we can always do more, as you are saying. We are a government that, for the first time, Ministry of Finance has a partnership agreement with the trade union and labor, etc., in which we look at our economic policies before we even come out. So I really, and I keep a very open, door, and so I really would encourage a discussion with anyone. I saw one of the letters in which it talked about indecent haste and that there's no national emergency. If COVID is not a national emergency, I don't know what is. That there's a lot of, what do they call it, a lethal disadvantage to go to the stock market at this time. And this is the best time for the pricing of gold. I mean, if you take advantage of this, when else would you be able to? But I think, the issue that really was full and made me discount the letter was when they ended saying that we are trying to stop elite capture, which initially meant that we here are doing this for ourselves and we have some shares in that. So if that frames the mindset in which it was brought, it makes it really very difficult to see whether it is genuine or it's intended, because you've seen us operate for 3.5 years. And what we have done is to follow this Akufo plan to make sure that everybody benefits. And so to talk about elite capture was for me a very painful issue. But thanks for the question, and truly I'm very open to a lot more discussions if that is. But I'm very clear at the right time to do it. I'm very clear that we're going to get best valuation. I'm also very clear that in reimagining ourselves as Ghanaians, we need to begin to think at a higher level in order and then push us to even more. So as we sit, Agyapa is 100% owned by me, which is 100% owned by government, and there are no hidden beneficiaries in that regard. It is a clean transaction as far as I know that we are going to make sure it is done, and we are just looking for ways to maximize value and to play in the game that our internationals play in, and now we have the skill set to be able to do that. So once we begin the process of listing all over, and it's going to be listed both in London and in Ghana, and we've done that before with Anglo Gold, Ashanti, etc. So it's also not a mystery in a sense to do that. The transaction, as far as I know, has been as transparent as you can be it. It's gone to Parliament on many levels, gone to Cabinet on any levels, and there's truly nothing to hide. It's creating something new. That may be uncomfortable, but it is something new that is going to stand us in great order. I remember being on Wall Street and companies like Barrick starting, and within an issue of a decade becoming the largest companies in the world. It is in the same way that we envision here, and that this Agyapa is going to be the largest company in Africa, in the mineral resource place, if we manage it right with the type of people that we are making sure are going to be custodians for this.
Mr. Great, we'll take the final batch of questions. Before we do, colleagues, I'll draw your attention to the law that was passed in 2018, Section 35 of the law. And I'll give your indulgence to raise it in your discussions and your analysis. Just, Minister, with your permission, if I read. As the mineral income paid to the fund and the dividend payable by the fund or a special purpose vehicle, in this case Agyapa, are not taxable. We passed this law in Parliament in 2018. All of us were there when we passed this law, when the government explained the structure of this kind of transaction. So it beggars belief that in the end, all of these things are raised as though something is being hidden under a table. Who passed a law to do something opaque? We'll take a final batch of questions. Yes, sir. 1, 2, Bloomberg 3, and then I'll give you the final one, and then we'll wrap up. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Ogbete. I work with GT. Since this approach of monitoring our gold royalties is so effective and innovative, are we likely to see an extension of same in our oil and gas royalties?
So my name is Kwekutim and I report for GH1 TV. I want to find out from you, so in your deliberations, you've called this unique, you've called it one of the best deals that had as a nation. The fact checks is done from the Deputy Minister, what we've seen, we're all going to do our fact check. But I want to find out if tomorrow I should find out that indeed this part of the deal was not too clear. I want to know my flexibilities with the law. Has this been situated in a way that I cannot go to court around it legally? Or at the end of the day, because another mess is that this whole deal is shredded so that you cannot sue if you do they'll come back to you and that Ghana is going to pay so much for it. So it's shredded in a way that you cannot sue eventually. Then again, my second part comes to, so when you hear a section of the nations, this whole deal, when we come, we will cancel it because it's not in good faith. How do you respond directly to such individuals? Because I commented on it at all. Thank you.
Thank you. These questions, whether or not it is true that anybody is giving immunities or anybody is barred from taking legal action against any of the parties in this transaction, because that's a claim out there. Is it true that anybody is barred from taking legal action against anybody? And what do you make of the threats from the opposition and threats to international investors not to participate? Yeah, Bloomberg.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Akol. Bloomberg is my media house. Honorable, just as a first line, will you please be generous to give us a copy of the presentation? Because I know some of us, the media, don't have too much grasp with this issue. So it helps us to better contextualize in our reportage so we don't get it wrong. And that's just a first plea. Two, couldn't we have established domiciled here in Ghana and then tax exempted? Or did we have to go to jail so that to sort of avoid the UK authorities imposing taxes upon our taxes? Maybe then what superior really reason do we have going to jail as against having a domicile here in Ghana?
Very well. So couldn't we an international version of the company? You do know the company is in two levels. There's one in Ghana, and then there's an international one. Couldn't we have done more or less both in Ghana, or just stayed with the one in Ghana and given the tax exemptions? Final question was from somebody here. Was it? From you, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Philip Milate, City Bishop. Just some two questions. If you would kindly get the full list of members on the Agyapa Royalties board, I think that would help us. And also, how true is it that royalties have been assigned to Agyapa into the indefinite future? That is what we know, that for some number of years, the investors will be benefiting from the royalties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you able to provide us the list of board members for Agyapa? And then secondly, is it true that there's an indefinite assignment of the royalties? And maybe, or is there a time cap that these royalties have been assigned for 10 years or 15 years, or is it indefinite? And then what that? I have a question myself, please forgive me. Let's talk about 16 concessions or 16 mining companies. And then we are hearing about 12. Can you just explain so that somebody doesn't say, at first they 16, now they say 12, so somebody's lying. Thank you.
I'll try on some of these. And Charles, I think the first question was from Morris on the effectiveness and innovativeness of that, and whether you extend it to, I guess, other resources, but specifically oil and gas. I think really, a continual search for the best way in which we can use, our resources and the timing in which it should be done. So we'll leave that open and really ensure that whatever resources we have, are maximized for us. You talked about the suing. I'm not sure anybody can buy anybody from suing. So I wouldn't worry about that right. The issue, I think it was maybe 93, when the country listed Ashanti Goldfields, and it was just an intensely, divisive period. But in the end, that was good for that moment, and it got done. But the challenge for me is, the opposition has been aware of this transaction since 2018 and have been part of the discussions, negotiations, etc. I can only hazard that because it's close to elections, they may feel that there's a political advantage of some sort. But it's not hasty, it's not new. And I saw some of them in committee discussions, so obviously in which they were supportive of all of that. So there must be a new element, and the only element I can see is 102 days away, when December 6th. And so, but they are doing their job as opposition, so we can do that. Presentation, I'm sure Charles can work on sharing some of that. In terms of it being domiciled here, when you are listing on the London Stock Exchange, you are basically trying to maximize your value. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's the issue of geography that sometimes clouds the sense of the value of the entity. And then there are also jurisdictions that investors are used to as coming from there to the market. So it is in looking at all of these options that makes us place as Guernsey or Jersey, and we took with Jersey for that. Do you want to the in-depth future and all of that, but I think we should understand that we are creating a company that is going to, be a going concern, and even as certain leases, come to the end of the concession, we also would have had resources buying other entities around Africa or wherever we want to go. So it's really quite expansive where we'll end up. Charles, if you can take that up.
Sure. Yes, a lot of when you get a concession from the Minerals Commission. When you get a concession, you go out and do your exploration, you discover gold, you then do your evaluation, and then you confirm your reserves. Unless you find 200,000 ounces of reserves, and you mine whatever 100,000 a year or 50,000 a year, that means your lease will end in 4 years or 5 years. I think the average lives of our leases are around 10, 11, 2 years. So essentially, that is what it is today. But the company, as the minister said, is in the business of procuring new royalty flows. So the understanding is that the company that will be living to perpetuity, but as some leases are expiring, some new ones are coming, and so on, and it's ongoing. So really, you just look at it as a portfolio of royalties that keeps changing over time as some fall off and some come on. Simple as that. Yeah. With regards to what was the other thing? Oh, that one minister answered it. Sorry. And then there was a thing about the companies. We have 16 royalty flows that are being assigned to Agyapa. Of those 16, 12 are producing, and there are 4 that are in development stage. So these are the typical ones that, as I said, they need money, complete the development, and start producing. Those 4 are Namdini, which is owned by Cardinal Resources, is up in the northern part of Ghana. Very, very positive find. There's the Wild Gold project, which is owned by Azuma Resources. There's the Bibiani one, which is owned by Resolute Mining. And there's the Enchi project, which is owned by Pinecrest Resources. So those are the 4 which would start producing soon, but are now at the development stage.
What I think Charles showed it on the screen is that even the 16 do not give us majority of royalties that the country earns. It's really important to realize that it's not all of the royalties that the country earns that are going into this new structure. It's important to know that. And so one should not be in haste to prejudge this. Thank you.
You said the board members will be affected.
Yes, the board, and that's another thing. We have to be sensitive because the listing rules are quite stringent. So actually in a quiet period, so there's not a lot that we can't really talk about. And until the prospectus has been submitted to the regulators, both here in London, and approved, we can't really discuss the board members, so to speak. There are some statutory positions on the board, though, which are filled by the Mining Income Investment Fund members. I think the CEO and 1 board member have an automatic seat on the Agyapa board. So whoever CEO of the Mining Income Investment Fund is a board member, and 1 other board member is nominated. And so those are government's representation on the board. Other than that, the details will all be spelled out in the prospectus. As soon as the prospectus is approved by the regulators here in the UK, it will be available to all investment banks that will be marketing the deal. They will share it to all prospective buyers in Ghana. You all get a just like with the MTN transaction and so on and so on. So, and everything will be in there, your board members, the total amount of transaction fees that we are paying to all the advisors, and the prospective mines, the list of the 16 mines that we're looking at, and everything. So that will be there. Also, with regards to the presentation I just gave, I've just been passed a note that is according to the listing rules, I cannot give it to you. Maybe what we can do is see if we can put together a more sanitized version that is not, the lawyers will sign off of and say that now it is within the disclosure rules to be able to give you that. We'll pass that over if that's okay with you.
Honourable Minister, we want to thank you for your time, yourself, your deputy, for giving us this education. I understand you have some other business to attend to, so you'll be taking leave of us. Colleagues, we have a problem with our COVID management situation in this country currently. That's why the Ghana Health Service boss and his team are here. Indulge them some 5-10 minutes. They will explain the nature of the problem and what we have to do to solve it. The Honourable Minister and his colleagues will be taking leave of us to attend to some other matters. So if you can just reposition your microphones for the Ghana Health Service team, they will explain the nature of the problem and how to deal with it. Very quickly, please reposition your microphones. Come this way. He will quickly.
This is something that we need to ensure that more and more people would be applying these protocols. One of the most sensitive ones is the use of the mask.